Hey, what's up, everybody? So tonight, Carolyn is at the hospital with Ethan per his request, and that means I'm back at the hotel room all by myself, which I guess is a good thing, right? Um, but long story short, because I'm here by myself and I'm bored, I'm going to treat all of you to a little science lesson based on my understanding of all of the different things that have been going on with Ethan with these facial nerve surgeries, and specifically more about the particular surgery that he had today. So, for those that aren't interested in a lot of detail, feel free to stop watching this video now. And yes, we can see I'm a 10th floor parent. But if you are interested, then just indulge me for a few moments and I'll do my best to explain some really kind of cool, interesting things about our facial nerve that I just didn't even know. So, the first thing is the procedure that Ethan had today was called a hypoglossal nerve transfer. And essentially, what they did was they took a nerve from his nerves that control his tongue muscles and they branched off of that and connected that to the trunk of his non functioning facial nerve branches. So, more on that in a few minutes. So, what I didn't realize is that in the brain, obviously, there are nerves coming down from the brain stem and go to different places in the body. There's a nerve called the cranial nerve 7. And this nerve basically goes, down through your brain stem, ultimately through a bunch of different little canals through the skull, and then it eventually comes out of the skull, I believe, into something called the parotid gland. And inside the parotid gland, cranial nerve 7 basically branches off into 5 separate branches. And I saw a little bit of a diagram today and a video on YouTube of someone who tried to explain for layman's like me how this branch of 5, how these 5 branches look. And basically what they did was they said, if you take your hand, and I'm going to try to do this without seeing myself on the camera, but if you take your hand and put like your thumb here, your index finger here, your middle finger here, your ring finger down here, like along your jawbone, and then your pinky down underneath your jawbone into your neck. These are the 5 branches of your facial nerve. So the top one here is called the temporal branch. And the temporal branch basically provides signal to 3 major muscles that help your face function. The first one is called the frontalis, and that controls the elevation of your eyebrows. The second is called the orbicularis oculi, and that controls the closing of the eyelids. The third is the corrugator supercilii, and this moves the eyebrow down and inward toward the nose, and it helps to also create the wrinkle lines that we see on our forehead when we kind of scrunch our eyebrows down and inward. So that's part of the temporal branch, which is up here. The second branch is called the zygomatic branch, and the zygomatic branch primarily provides function to the orbicularis oculi, which we talked about just a second ago, which controls the closing of the eyelids. The third is called the buccal branch. The buccal branch has 3 primary muscles that it provides functionality to as well. The first one is called the orbicularis oris, and it's essentially a round-shaped muscle or a sphincter-type muscle, which is made up of 4 independent quadrants, and it helps to close your mouth and pucker your lips. So that functionality is provided by the orbicularis oris. The second is called the buccinator, which I think is just kind of a really cool name, buccinator. But this basically pulls back the angle of the mouth and flattens the cheek and holds the cheek up against the teeth while you're chewing food. And the third is called the zygomaticus muscle. which basically controls facial expression. It draws the mouth's angle upward and outward. And so, like when a person smiles, this functionality right here is by the zygomaticus muscle. And that's being innervated, which is the word when the nerve provides signal to the muscles, by the buccal branch. And then the marginal mandibular branch is the fourth. And basically, this is controlling something called the mentalis muscle. And the mentalis muscle is the primary muscle of the lower lip. And it's used, for example, when you pout. So it elevates and wrinkles the skin of the chin and helps your bottom lip to protrude. That's the marginal mandibular branch. And the fifth branch, which was down in your neck here, is called the cervical branch. And the cervical branch main function is to provide signal to or innervate something called the platysma. And the platysma pulls down on the mandible, which opens the mouth. It pulls the corners of the lips out to the side and down, which forms a frown. So this whole part right here. Also, it can form wrinkles in the neck as someone gets older and their skin starts to sag. It's not as elastic as it used to be. That's all controlled by the platysma. So in Ethan's case, what happened was, by the way, that's all I know at this point from a scientific perspective. And yes, you could probably tell I was reading some of that from some notes that I had taken. But basically what happened with Ethan was whatever occurred when he had his brain tumor removed that caused the damage to his facial nerve, which then caused complete paralysis on the left side of his face. Essentially what happened was all of those functions that I just explained, the five branches of the nerves that go to those various muscles within your face, that just all ceased to work anymore. And the hope was that as things kind of healed in his brain and time went by, that some of that functionality would just naturally return. And unfortunately, it did not. So the first facial surgery that we had for Ethan was to connect his chewing nerve to part of the nerve that controls smile. And so what that procedure did, or is doing, is the branch that they took from his chewing nerve, they attached it to part of the nerve that controls his smile function. And at the end of the nerve, there's what's called axons. And those axons from the good chewing nerve grow into the bad nerve that's not functioning anymore. So when Ethan bites down now, you may have noticed that you're starting to see a small smile. But that is completely triggered by him biting down on his teeth, like clenching his teeth closed. So that was the first procedure that we had done. Part of that procedure also was to do a cross-facial nerve graft. And essentially what we did with that was the blinking functionality. We wanted to do a cross-facial nerve graft so that the blinking of, I'm messing up my sides here, but the blinking of his functioning eye would actually eventually control the blinking of his non-functioning side of his face. And to do that, you may remember that they took a section of nerve out of his leg, which then caused a little bit of a numb patch on the outer, edge of like the ball of his foot, which doesn't really even bother him at all. But they took that because there's not enough nerve fiber, if you will, to go from one side to the other. So they used that to actually do a graft and essentially create a connection between both sides. So that procedure, I think they said, would take about 9 to 12 months to see any real results. One of the ways that the doctor actually tests to see if anything is happening there yet is he'll actually like tap Ethan on the lip right here, or he'll even go over to like wherever the nerve is being run from, and he asks Ethan if he can feel that anywhere else. Because I guess once the connection has grown and it's working properly, when you tap right here or over where it is, Ethan will actually feel it like around his eye where the blinking is controlled. It's really kind of weird. But none of that actually helps to bring back what they call the dynamic reanimation of the hemiface, so this half of his face. So that's what the hypoglossal surgery that we had done today is for, is you take the nerves from the tongue nerve and you essentially, I'm going to try to remember how this was explained to me, but you may remember earlier in the first part of this video, I talked about how the cranial nerve 7, which is the facial nerve, comes from the brain stem down into the skull through this canal thing, out of the bone into something called the parotid gland, and then it breaks off into 5 branches. Well, what they did was they basically made a cut in that nerve where it actually branches off into those 5 branches. So there's like a little piece left hanging from that where the 5 branches go, and then the nerve that actually comes from the brainstem and exits out into the parotid gland. So they made a cut there, and then they made a cut into the hypoglossal nerve and essentially connected those 2 sections of nerve together. So the hypoglossal nerve fiber or fibers, whatever, branches, what they took from that, they connected to the trunk of the part of the facial nerve that was cut, which provides, life, if you will, to those 5 branches that I talked about earlier. So over time, just like the other nerves that I talked about, the axons in the tongue nerves will grow out and into those 5 branches that are providing functionality to that whole side of the face. And so it's called dynamic facial reanimation. But essentially the goal is that within about a year time frame or so, total tone and functionality will essentially return to this side of the face, including all the things that I talked about with those 5 branches of nerve functionality. Those things don't work today, and the goal is with this surgery that eventually all of those things will work. So raising his eyebrows, blinking his eye, making wrinkles in his forehead, being able to do weird things with his face, all those types of functionality will eventually come back. And the only real risk to this procedure was that you could actually experience some weakening of the tongue because you're taking some of the nerves, if you will, the branches of nerves that actually provide the muscle in your tongue with its energy or its life. You're taking some of that and rerouting it elsewhere. So you could actually experience some weakening of the tongue muscle. The initial observations after Ethan had his procedure done today was that he was still fully capable of moving his tongue left, right, up, down, to the roof of the mouth, to the bottom of the mouth without any issues. And so the doctor said that typically you would see that weakening right after surgery, and if it was anything major, that you would notice it earlier, sooner than later. So we're hoping that does not occur. The procedure itself, though, went very well today. It was 3.5 hours or so. Wow, there's a lot of sirens out there, right near a hospital. But he said it went really well. Ethan recovered well. The first thing he wanted to eat was ice cream, so we definitely got him some ice cream. And I left him and Carolyn probably about a half hour, 45 minutes ago, came back to the hotel here. And I kind of wanted to just get this documented so that I could remember. That's pretty much why I do these things, but also to educate all of you, for those of you that stayed with me. Thank you for indulging me, and I hope that you learned something new that you didn't know before. So next time you take for granted the fact that you can raise one eyebrow independent from another, or you can just do really weird things with your face, remember that if you take your hand and just put it up against your face, all of that nerve functionality is what's controlling your muscles, and it's broken up into those cool little sections or quadrants. Well, not quadrants because there's 5, but it's broken up into all those sections very systematically. And if anything was to ever happen to your actual facial nerve coming from your brain stem, that would explain why you experience a lot of those symptoms with your face, especially like Bell's palsy or a stroke, etc. So, hey, I hope you guys have a great rest of your night. Thanks for your prayers. Thanks for checking in with us. And we're just thankful that Ethan's surgery went well today. And again, me who worries all the time, I've been worrying about this procedure for quite a while now. And on the way to the hospital today, Ethan, who is often a young man of few words, told me, Dad, you don't need to worry because God has this. God has me in his hands, and I'm going to be okay. And if my son believes that, I have to believe it too. So thanks again for your prayers. We love you guys. Talk to you later. Bye.